Hi, I'm Dr. Michael Bogart with Aspect Ministries, and I am doing a series on the Great Flood of Noah. In this video, I want to introduce you to just a few of the literally dozens of flood legends from different cultures around the world. Every continent has people groups with flood legends. Many of them are surprisingly similar to the Bible's account of the Great Flood. Some of them are very similar to one another. Actually, this isn't terribly surprising if you think about it. If there was a universal flood sometime in the mists of antiquity, and everyone now on earth is descended from the survivors of that flood, you might expect that many groups of people would retain this pivotal story in their legends and histories. We would also expect that there would be variations, adaptations, corruptions, and changes as time went by and people spread out over the face of the globe. The fact that they all share some elements of the Bible story indicates to me that the Bible is the source material of the original events. Now keep in mind that the different groups of people whose stories I'm going to be telling did not have contact with the Bible at the time that these flood stories arose among them. In the description box below, I will put a link to an important website that has all of these stories in written form. So here goes my summary of Genesis 6 through 9. Only a few generations after creation, the human race had become incredibly wicked. So God decided to start over again with the one family that he could still work with. That was the family of Noah. Noah was directed to build an ark, a huge floating box in essence, with very specific dimensions to make it extremely seaworthy. He was to take his family on board along with two of every basic kind of animal. And when the ark was finished, a flood came on the earth for 40 days and nights. Rain poured from the sky. Reservoirs of water from deep under the earth also gushed forth, covering everything with water, mud, and rock. The family of Noah, his wife, 3 sons and their wives, with the animals of every kind, were on the ark for over a year. When they finally exited, they found everything changed. In gratitude for their salvation, Noah offered sacrifices. Now that's about as far as I'll take the story right now. So now let's compare the biblical flood story with legends from around the world. We're going to start with the Sumerians. The Sumerians lived in close proximity to the flood, both in time and in location. The Sumerian flood legend dates back at least 4,000 years to around 2000 BC. Some scholars who dismiss the Bible as mere folklore claim that the Bible's account of the flood was actually taken from the Sumerian flood legend. How in the world they think they know that is a story in itself. Personally, I'm convinced that the Bible is an accurate record of the event and that other stories are versions of it or maybe recollections from a different viewpoint. The Sumerian story is embedded in something called the Epic of Gilgamesh. In it, the hero Gilgamesh loses his closest friend and is sobered by the prospect of death. In his search for answers to this mystery, he is consumed with finding the secret of eternal life. His quest leads him to the mountains of Ararat, where he encounters a very old man called Utnapishtim. Utnapishtim is the Sumerian equivalent of the biblical Noah. He tells Gilgamesh that the god Ea warned him about the flood. Now, this name for the god who warned Utnapishtim is very interesting to me. The Hebrew name for God, as found in Exodus chapter 3, is Yahweh, or Yahvah. And it's easy to see how Ea and Yahvah could be just different versions of the same name for the creator God. Now, in the Sumerian myth, Ea is one of many gods, whereas in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, Yahvah is the only true God. In any case, Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh that Yah told him about the coming flood and then directed him to demolish his house and use the lumber to build a floating ark. Utnapishtim built the ark along with some craftsmen that he recruited for the help. Meantime, he gathered juvenile versions of all animals to take with him. When the ark was ready, it began to pour rain for 7 days and 7 nights. The entire earth was destroyed as a result, and as the floodwaters receded, the ark came to rest on a large mountain. From there, the survivors and the animals repopulated the whole world. Now, as I said, this Sumerian myth is the closest in geographic location, detail, and time to the Bible. Now let's move on to the other stories by region. And there are so many to choose from in each region, so I am going to take what I think are some of the very best examples. We'll start with Europe. Also, as I tell the stories, I'll do my best to pronounce the non-English words and names, but please bear with me. Let's start with the Greeks and Romans. They shared similar versions of the flood story, so I will combine them. The story probably originated with the Greeks, but it was recorded by the Roman author Ovid in his Metamorphoses around the time of Christ. The story begins with the god Jupiter, who is chief and father of the gods. The Greeks called him Zeus. The Romans actually named him Eupater or Jupiter, which is a shortened way of saying Father You. Again, you see the similarities between You, Yah, and Yahweh. And that itself seems to indicate to me that there was some sort of common knowledge of the Creator in deep antiquity. So Jupiter was offended by some of the horrendous things that he saw. Human beings were doing terrible things on the earth like child sacrifice and cannibalism. And it seems that the acts of Deucalion, ruler of Arcadia, who killed and cooked his own son, were especially offensive. So as a judgment, Jupiter turned him into a wolf and then vowed to destroy the rest of the earth with a flood. But there was still a family that deserved to be spared, Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha. Deucalion's father found out about the coming flood and warned Deucalion, telling him to build a boat to save his family. Jupiter then rained down the sky waters and stirred up the sea waters, which covered the entire earth and killed every breathing creature. Then Jupiter sent the north wind to calm the waters, and the flood began to subside. When the earth was dry, Deucalion and Pyrrha left the boat and visited a temple to seek guidance in how to renew the human race. They were told by the gods to go out with veiled heads and throw the bones of their great mother behind them. They interpreted that to mean that they should throw stones, which would be the bones of the great Earth Mother, behind them. And as they did that, the stones turned into humans and the earth was repopulated. Moving on to Wales in northwest Europe. Wales is that large peninsula that sort of sticks out west from England. The Welsh legend is that the Lake of Llyon, which could be the ancient name for Bala Lake, near where one branch of my mother's family came from in northern Wales, near Bala. It is one of the largest lakes in Wales, and I visited it some years ago. Anyway, this lake burst its banks and flooded all the earth. The flood was caused by the depredations of a terrible monster called Afanc, which lived near the lake. A man named Dwyfan and his wife Dwyfach built a ship without a mast and escaped, taking with them pairs of all types of living creatures. When the ship landed, Britain became the source for repopulating the entire world. The Transylvania Gypsies tell this story. Long ago, people lived forever and had no troubles. But one day, an old traveler asked a couple for a night's lodging, which they granted him. When the traveler left the next day, he gave them a beautiful fish, saying that he would return in 9 days with a reward if they did not eat the fish and returned it at that time. After a few days, the wife gave in to temptation and roasted the fish, and she was immediately struck by lightning. Then it began to rain, and when the old man returned, he told the host that all living things would be drowned, but that his host would be saved since at least he had kept his part of the deal. The old man told them to quickly marry another wife, gather his kinfolk, and build a boat on which to save themselves and all the animals. It rained for a whole year, with the waters covering everything. After the waters sank, the people and animals disembarked and began multiplying. But it took thousands of years before people were as numerous as they had been before the flood. Now, personally, I think the part about the fish is intriguing because gypsies originated in India, and during the Middle Ages, they migrated west into Europe. So when we get to the Hindu flood story from India, you'll see a similar fish element reappear. So the fish theme seems to be an Indian thing. Okay, that's plenty for one video. In the next video on ancient flood legends, we'll take a look at some from the Middle East and Africa. We'll see you then.